the first thing you notice is the door. Not the curved steel walls, not the size, not the fact that the whole thing looks like a miniature airplane hangar dropped into a gravel lot. The door. Because it has a lock on it. This entire home cost about $2,500 to build. That's less than 1 month's rent in most American cities. And for the man who lives inside, a 67-year-old Army veteran I'll call Dale, that lock is the first thing that has belonged to him in almost 4 years. But after spending time around a village full of these tiny Quonset homes and the people who live in them, I can tell you the reality is more complicated, more surprising, and honestly, more emotional than the headlines make it sound. To understand why anyone would house human beings in what looks like a half-buried steel pipe, you have to go back to 1941. The United States Navy needed shelters that could be shipped anywhere in the world and assembled by untrained men in a single day. Engineers at Quonset Point, Rhode Island, came up with an answer that was almost embarrassingly simple. A half-cylinder of corrugated steel, bolted together rib by rib with a flat wall on each end. No load-bearing walls, no complicated roof, nothing to figure out, just an arch. The military ended up producing more than 150,000 of these Quonset huts during World War II. They held barracks, hospitals, chapels, mess halls. And when the war ended, thousands of returning soldiers actually lived in surplus huts on college campuses, because America had a housing shortage then too. The whole kit shipped in wooden crates and went up with hand tools. Soldiers assembled them on Pacific Islands, in the North Atlantic, in deserts and jungles, often in a single afternoon. And after 1945, universities across the country bought surplus huts by the hundreds and lined them up in rows for married veterans studying on the GI Bill. Students raised babies in them. Some campuses kept their Quonset villages standing for 20 years, so the idea of an American family calling one of these arches home is not new at all. We've just forgotten that we already did it once. So there's a strange symmetry to what's happening now. 80 years later, the same arch that sheltered American soldiers overseas is being bolted together in gravel lots and church parking areas across the country. This time, for Americans who have nowhere else to go. And in many of these villages, a striking number of the residents are veterans themselves. The design survived for the same reason it worked in 1941. A curved steel shell sheds rain and snow on its own. Wind flows over it instead of pushing against it. There are almost no seams to leak and no flat roof to collapse. A small crew of volunteers, most of whom have never built anything in their lives, can raise one of these homes in a weekend. The village I want to show you sits on the edge of a mid-sized American city, on land a church wasn't using. Rows of these steel arches, each about 10 feet wide and 10 feet deep, sit on small concrete pads with gravel paths running between them. Solar lights line the walkways. Somebody has planted marigolds in 5-gallon buckets outside their door. From a distance, it looks almost like a campground until you notice the wheelchair ramp on one unit and the American flag on another, and the hand-painted house numbers, and you realize people aren't visiting here. They live here. The $2,500 figure is real, but it comes with an asterisk, and I think honesty matters more than a clean headline. That number covers the steel arch kit bought in bulk, the insulation, the door, the window, the wiring for a light and an outlet, and the small electric heater. It does not count the donated land, the volunteer labor, or the concrete that a local supplier gave at cost. If a developer built this same unit commercially, it would cost several times more. But that's exactly the point of these villages. They exist because ordinary people, from retirees to church groups to high school shop classes, decided they could swing a hammer and split the cost of steel. One retired school teacher who has personally helped raise 11 of these homes describes assembling the arch like a barn raising from 100 years ago, except it's over by lunch. And if you've never seen one of these build days, it's worth picturing. A Saturday morning, a flatbed truck, and a pile of curved steel ribs laid out on the gravel like the skeleton of a whale. Volunteers in work gloves bolt the first 2 ribs together on the ground, then a group of them walks the arch upright, while somebody steadies a ladder and somebody else reads the instructions out loud. There's coffee in thermoses and a retired electrician double-checking the wiring, and a teenager on his phone who gets handed a wrench and, by mid-morning, forgets the phone exists. Rib by rib, the tunnel grows. By early afternoon, the end walls go on. By evening, a structure that did not exist at breakfast has a door, a window, and a light that turns on. The volunteers stand around it in the fading light the way people stand around a newborn. And in a week or two, someone who has been sleeping outside will turn the key to it. So what do you actually get for $2,500? Step through Dale's door with me. The interior is about 100 square feet, roughly the size of a walk-in closet in a suburban house or a single parking space. And yet the curve changes everything. Because the walls arc up and over instead of pressing in flat, the ceiling at the center is over 8 feet tall, and the space feels bigger than the numbers suggest. There's a real bed against the back wall, raised on a frame with storage tubs underneath. Wooden shelves follow the curve of the wall, holding books, a coffee maker, framed photographs of Dale's daughter. A small table folds down for meals. The electric heater is mounted near the floor, and a single window over the bed lets in the morning light. The insulation is hidden behind plywood paneling that a volunteer stained the color of honey, so the inside feels less like a shipping container and more like a cabin. Now, there is no bathroom inside, no shower, and no kitchen with running water. That's the trade-off at the heart of this entire model, and nobody here pretends otherwise. These are what housing experts call non-congregate shelters, private sleeping quarters with shared everything else. In the center of the village sits a larger building with restrooms, hot showers, laundry machines, and a communal kitchen where residents cook on a schedule. Dale walks about 90 seconds to use the bathroom. In July, that's nothing. In January, at 2 in the morning, at 67 years old, it is very much something. He keeps a coat hanging on a hook by the door for exactly that reason. Daily life here runs on a rhythm that surprised me. Mornings start early because steel talks. When rain hits the curved roof, the whole home fills with a soft, drumming sound that some residents describe as the best sleep of their lives, and others admit took weeks to get used to. Residents sign up for chores: cleaning the bathhouse, tending the raised garden beds, staffing the front gate. There are rules, and they're not gentle suggestions. Quiet hours. No guests overnight without approval. Sobriety requirements in some villages. Caseworker check-ins in nearly all of them. Every resident is expected to be working towards something: permanent housing, disability benefits they're owed, reconnecting with family, treatment, a job. This isn't meant to be the end of anyone's story. It's meant to be the chapter where the story turns. The heart of the village, though, isn't any of the steel arches. It's the communal kitchen in the evening. Around 6 o'clock, the smell of whatever's on the stove drifts out across the gravel. And people who spent years eating alone out of gas station bags sit down at a long table together. Tuesday might be chili made by the former nurse. Thursday might be the trucker's spaghetti, which everyone teases him about and everyone finishes. It sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing. Several residents said the shared meals did as much for them as the roof did, because homelessness doesn't just take your address. It takes your seat at every table you used to belong to. Here, they got one back. Winter is where the design earns its keep. That little electric heater, in a well-insulated 100 square feet, can hold the home at 70 degrees when it's 15 outside, for roughly $1 a day in electricity. Residents who spent previous winters in tents or under overpasses talk about that first warm night the way other people talk about weddings. One woman in her 70s told a volunteer that she cried the first evening, not because of the heat itself, but because she could take her shoes off. She hadn't slept without her shoes on in 2 years, because on the street, you may have to run. Summer is the harder season, and this is where I want to be straight with you. A steel arch in direct August sun becomes an oven without help. The villages that work well paint the roofs with white reflective coating, mount small shade sails, and put a window fan or a tiny air conditioning unit in each home. The villages that cut corners produce units that hit 95 degrees inside by mid-afternoon, and residents end up sitting outside until sundown. Steel also sweats. Warm breath meets cold metal, and without proper vapor barriers and ventilation, condensation beads on the inside of the shell and drips. The good builds solved this. The rushed ones are fighting mold within a year. $2,500 buys a genuinely livable home only when it's built carefully. And that detail almost never makes it into the feel-good news segments. Before we go any further, I want to pause for a moment because I know exactly who watches this channel. Some of you are watching from a warm living room, but some of you are watching from a car. Some of you are one missed paycheck, one medical bill, one rent increase away from needing a village like this one. And some of you are watching because someone you love is already there. For you, I put together a guide called the Veteran's Blueprint. It walks through the specific programs, benefits, and step-by-step survival strategies in the kind of detail that simply doesn't fit inside a video. So I put all of it in one place. Whether you're a veteran, a senior on a fixed income, a family member trying to help, or someone who just refuses to look away, the link is in the description below this video. It's there for you, and it could genuinely change the road ahead. Now, let me take you back inside the village, because there's a side of this story we haven't touched yet. The people. Because the biggest misconception about a place like this isn't about the steel or the cost. It's about who lives behind those numbered doors. The fastest growing group of homeless Americans right now is seniors. Adults in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, many of whom worked their entire lives, are falling into homelessness for the first time in old age, pushed there by rent increases on fixed incomes, by medical debt, by the death of a spouse whose pension paid the bills. In the most recent federal count, more than 770,000 people were homeless in America on a single night, the highest number ever recorded, and older adults are one of the fastest rising groups within it. Walk this village and you'll meet a former nurse, a retired long-haul trucker, and a widow who cleaned office buildings for 30 years. People whose faces would not look out of place at your church, your grocery store, your Thanksgiving table. Take the widow. I'll call her Ruth. She's 71. For 30 years, she cleaned office buildings at night, the kind of work where nobody learns your name. And she did it while raising 2 kids and nursing a husband through a long illness. His pension and her small Social Security check covered the apartment right up until he passed. Then the pension stopped, the rent went up twice in 2 years, and the math simply broke. She did everything the advice columns tell you to do. She downsized, she sold her wedding china, she skipped medications to make rent. It bought her 14 months. Ruth never touched drugs, never missed a payment in her life, and at 69 years old, she slept in her Buick in a church parking lot for the better part of a year. When people picture homelessness, they do not picture Ruth. They should. Because her story is the one that's growing fastest, and it starts with a sentence millions of Americans could say today. The rent went up and the income didn't. And then there's Dale. He served in the Army in the 1970s, came home, worked construction for 4 decades, and raised a daughter mostly on his own. And then there's Dale. He served in the Army in the 1970s, came home, worked construction for 4 decades, and raised a daughter mostly on his own. His knees gave out before his mortgage did, but not by much. Surgery, recovery, missed work, savings gone, then the house. A slide that took 18 months from start to finish. He spent almost 4 years in shelters and encampments. And he'll tell you plainly that it was the shelters that broke him more than any winter ever did. 100 cots in one room, lights on at 6, belongings stolen while he slept, no dignity and no door. When he finally got the keys to his Quonset home, he stood outside for a long moment before going in. Then he locked the door behind him, sat down on his own bed, and listened to the silence. He told a caseworker later that it was the first time in 4 years his shoulders came down from around his ears. That's the thing a spreadsheet will never capture. Researchers who study these villages keep finding the same pattern. It's not the square footage that changes people, it's the lock. A door you control is the difference between surviving and planning. Within weeks of moving in, residents who spent years in survival mode start doing things that seem small and are actually enormous. They make dentist appointments, they apply for benefits, they call their children. One village director put it simply, nobody can rebuild a life while guarding their backpack. Now let's talk about what the skeptics say, because they deserve an answer. Is 100 square feet of steel a real solution to homelessness? No, and the honest villages will tell you that themselves. This is transitional housing, a bridge, not a destination. The real measure is what happens next, and the numbers there are genuinely encouraging. In well-run villages, a majority of residents move on to permanent housing, often within a year or two. And the villages that do this best have turned moving out into a ritual. When a resident signs a lease on an apartment, the whole village gathers to see them off, and there's usually a moment where the departing resident hands their key back to the director in front of everyone, knowing it will go to whoever is next on the waiting list. People cry at these things, not because leaving is sad, but because the key changing hands means the machine works. Somebody came in off the street, put their life back together, and made room for the next person to do the same. Compare the economics, and it gets hard to argue with. A single emergency shelter bed can cost a city tens of thousands of dollars per year to operate. A hospital stay for someone who collapsed on the street costs more. A jail bed costs more still. A $2,500 steel home with a shared bathhouse, built by volunteers on donated land, is one of the cheapest interventions anyone has found. And unlike a shelter cot, people actually want to be there. There are real criticisms that stick. Some cities have used tiny home villages as an excuse to clear encampments without building the permanent housing that has to come next. Some villages are placed on the far edge of town, miles from jobs and bus lines, which quietly tells residents they're being stored rather than helped. And waiting lists are long everywhere. For every dale with a key, there are dozens of people still outside the gate. The steel arch is an answer to one question. Where does a human being sleep tonight, safely, with dignity? It answers that question brilliantly. It was never designed to answer all the others. There's one more moment I want you to see, and it happens after dark. Around 10 o'clock, the village goes quiet. Solar lights glow along the paths. A resident on gate duty sits with a thermos by the entrance, and behind every numbered door, someone is sleeping with both eyes closed for the first time in years. If you've never lost your housing, that phrase might not land. So let one resident explain it the way he explained it to a volunteer. On the street, you sleep like a deer. Here, you just sleep. On a late summer evening in the village, the light turns gold and the curved roofs catch it like rows of small hills. Dale sits in a folding chair outside his door, coffee in hand, waving at neighbors coming back from the bus stop. The marigolds in the buckets are blooming. Somebody's radio plays softly 2 doors down. And I keep thinking about that word we use, homeless, and how it flattens people into a category when every door in that gravel lot has a whole human life behind it. A nurse, a trucker, a soldier, a widow. 80 years ago, this steel arch sheltered Americans through a world war. Today, it shelters Americans through a quieter war, the kind fought one rent increase, one hospital bill, one bad winter at a time. So what is it actually like living in a tiny $2,500 Quonset home? It's small, it's imperfect. In August it's too hot, and in January the walk to the bathroom is too cold. And for the people who live there, it is also the first locked door, the first quiet night, and the first honest chance in years. Sometimes the distance between despair and a future is exactly 100 square feet. If you want the practical side of this, the programs, the benefits, the step-by-step help for yourself or for someone you love, the Veteran's Blueprint is linked in the description right below this video. It's the part of this story I couldn't fit on screen. And next week, I'm taking you inside a converted motel where an entire floor is reserved for senior citizens with nowhere else to go. You won't believe what a room there costs the city. I'll see you inside.